The Green Girl by Colubrina, An Archive of Our Own, Chapter 2. Potions was brilliant. Hermione sat with Theodore Nott, and as she listened, wrapped to the professor's speech about bottling fame and stopping up death, she passed the boy a quick note. How would you bottle up death? He rolled his eyes. The professor seemed to have it in for the Potter kid, which was a bit odd since they just started. But as she herself was a bit miffed that, as far as the boy who lived was concerned, she had become invisible as soon as she'd been sorting into Slytherin, she couldn't exactly feel bad for the brat. The professor had started their first class by asking the boy a variety of questions, and Theo had to physically restrain her from shoving her hand into the air. "Cut it out," he hissed at her. "You'll look like a brown-nosing swat." "But I know the answer," she hissed back. "So what?" he replied, and his narrow-eyed glare, she'd stopped raising her hand. Whatever else she'd figured out since she'd been sorted, one thing was eminently clear. Slytherins looked after their own. Even if Theo wasn't her chum, and he was, he'd have kept her from making herself look bad if it took hexing her into immobility. Slytherin, as it turned out, was also brilliant. She'd punched some boy who called her a mudblood, and instead of getting into trouble the way she'd had when she'd handled bullies at her primary school, Hermione could be very physical when she was angry. Everyone had laughed at the kid she'd pummeled and told him to watch his language around their housemate. "Go call the Gryffindorks mudbloods if you want to be vulgar," an old girl had said, with a sneer before adding to Hermione. "He does it again, go for the balls." "He does it again," Draco had said. "He won't have any balls left for her to kick." She'd shoved him for that. "I can look after myself," she'd said, and he'd grin his evil little grin at her. "Yep," he said. "If you couldn't, it wouldn't be any fun." Draco was also brilliant. Spoiled and impulsive and mean as a snake, but brilliant. Having friends, real friends, was amazing. She never even wanted to leave this place. Flying, unfortunately, was not brilliant. Or rather, she wasn't brilliant at it. That Draco was particularly annoying. He spent so much of their first flying lesson offering her tongue-in-cheek suggestions. Theo had finally told him to cut it out before he became the second member of the Slytherins Hermione has punched club. At least there was one boy worse than her, she thought as she sat down in the grass and sulked. Pansy flopped down next to her and Blaise joined them. His long legs kicked out in front of him as they watched some Gryffindor, whose name she couldn't even remember, lose control of his broom. "See?" Blaise said, poking Hermione. "It could have been worse." "Yeah," she said, lying back. "I could have been sorted in with them. I wanted to be, you know." Pansy gave a dramatic shudder before asking, "What's Draco doing? Why is he getting into it with Potter again? What now?" Hermione sighed. "Wasn't it your turn to watch him?" she muttered. "I wish he'd leave the kid alone." "Potter's a spoiled brat," Pansy said, lying down next to her, "and Draco can look out for himself." Hermione rolled her eyes. As far as she can tell, Draco is drawn to trouble, like the proverbial bee to honey, with never a backup plan to his name. Shit. Blaise pointed up at the sky, at Draco streaking towards the ground as fast as he could, while Potter swooped higher in the air. Both girls sat up and watched as Draco landed smoothly as he, Greg, and Vincent sauntered over to them. Smug grins plastered on their faces. "Cutting it close, mate," Blaise added, as Professor McGonagall, protector of all things Gryffindor, came racing at the building and shrieking at Harry Potter. "Did you really steal that stupid kid's stupid thing?" Hermione demanded, overhearing the excuses and protests as Harry Potter was dragged off by his ear. "Are you an idiot?" "Oh, Hermione, why are you sticking up for him?" Draco asked, flopping down next to her and tugging on her hair. "Didn't he do that wrinkled nose thing at you this morning? That I can't possibly go near this one because she might suddenly turn evil and devour my soul, oh so superior Gryffindor sneer?" "He did," Blaise confirmed. "You didn't see it because you were reading out loud from Quidditch Through the Ages. As if that would help." She shoved him, and he laughed. "Don't worry, We'll give you the remedial flying lessons on the sly. Can't have you embarrassing our house. And it's not like Madame Hooch gives a crap whether anyone other than her precious Quidditch players can fly. You've challenged him to what? Hermione hissed at Draco across the table in the common room. You are an idiot. You're going to go sneaking around, losing points for Slytherin, all because you just can't leave that worthless kid alone? What is wrong with you? Oh, come on, Hermione, Draco said, stuffing a sweet his mother had sent him into his mouth and passing her the box. She eyed him with some irritation, but couldn't resist the petit fours. I bet he doesn't even show, Theo said, reaching into the box. That Gryffindor bravely bullshit is all talk. They're brave, Blaise said. They're just stupid about it. You want someone to run right towards death? Get a Griff. You want someone to win? Slytherin. Hey! Draco looked at his box. You prats ate all my cake. And it was so nice of you to share, Hermione said. Especially since you're going to end up losing points for Slytherin tonight when you get caught out past curfew dueling Harry Potter. I won't get caught, Draco said with confidence. It turned out that he and Theo were both right. Potter didn't show, but Draco managed to avoid getting caught. Told ya, he said to Hermione as they headed to breakfast. She rolled her eyes again, an expression she was rapidly becoming too familiar with when dealing with Draco. If you had to sneak out, you could have at least beaten the little jerk, she muttered. Why is he still here, anyway? Shouldn't he have been sent home or something after flying around like a crazy person after we were told not to? I don't know, Greg muttered. What's he got? Their least favorite first year was walking towards them in the hall, holding a long, narrow package with something approaching reverence. Let's find out, Draco suggested, and they stepped in front of the boy and blocked his way. I don't see why we're doing this, Hermione muttered to Theo. Who cares what Potter gets in the mail? We're humoring Draco because he gets his cake in the mail, Theo said, clearly enough for Draco to hear them. Their blonde friend shot back a look of utter irritation. Since his minions made no attempt to stop him, he snatched the package out of Harry Potter's hands. That's a broom, he laughed. You're in trouble now, Potter. First years aren't allowed to have them. It's a Nimbus 2000, Ron bragged. Hermione leaned over to Theo and said loudly, Is he actually bragging about another boy's broomstick? Ron flushed, and Theo bit his lip and looked down at her, a grin on his face. I'm on the Quidditch team, Potter was bragging, and Hermione could see that Draco, who talked about Quidditch so much that he wanted to scream some days, was about to snap. Well, isn't that nice for you, she said. Some of us play by the rules, but I guess if you're a celebrity, when you break the rules, you get rewarded by having more bet for you. I wonder if he'll get a write-up in the Prophet, Theo chimed in, as Draco slowly backed away from the hated boy. Hermione grabbed onto his hand to make sure that he wouldn't do something rash. Oh, I'm sure he will, she said. After all, he's famous. He's so famous his little sidekick knows all about his broom. She waggled the fingers of her free hand in the air, and that Theo snickered. Have fun playing with your broom, boys, she said as she hauled Draco off to the corridor, Theo and Greg behind them. That is so unfair, she ranted later in the common room. If you'd gotten caught flying around like that, well, Greg said, his father would have shown up, and everything would have been fine. Fine, Hermione snapped. If you had gotten caught, I would have been so dead, Greg said, slouching back in his seat. Rules apply to everyone, or they apply to no one, Hermione said, seething. It's not right. You didn't really think the world was fair, did you? Theo asked, rolling his eyes at her. After that, Hermione's dislike for Ron Weasley and Harry Potter shifted from mild annoyance, because they dropped her once she was sorted, into a far more active urge to torment the pair. She got her next chance in Charms, when Weasley was unable to make his feather float. You're saying it wrong, Hermione said, as clearly as she could, to Weasley. You need to follow the pronunciation guide in the book, not the one in your head. Rules, Weasley. Magic follows predictable rules. Let's see you do it if you're so clever, the boy snapped, and with his little smirk, she cast the charm, and the feather floated in front of her. Yes! Professor Flitwick clapped his hands. Miss Granger's got it! 5 points to Slytherin! As they all streamed out the classroom and wound their way throughout the courtyard, Weasley sniped to Potter. I hate that Granger girl. She's just such a horror. I bet she's got no friends even in Slytherin. Harry Potter pointed across the open space to where Greg Goyle was spinning the girl in question around while she pounded on his back, and laughed. Malfoy's voice carried through the air. That's our girl, showing those gits who knows how to do it. Put me down, Weasley could hear her wailing, or I'll hex you when you least expect it. Even Pansy Parkinson, who had her hand tucked into Malfoy's, was smirking. She nudged the blonde and pointed over to Weasley and Potter, and the whole group of Slytherins, including Hermione, waved mockingly at the pair. I think, said Harry Potter, she's got friends. I don't see why I have to go. Hermione stared up at Blaise and Greg with some annoyance. Draco was off holding Pansy's hand somewhere, a relationship that alternated between cute and annoying, and Theo was probably already in the stands. The boy had an unhealthy love of Quidditch. She, however, had no such thing. It was cold outside, it was wet, and here, down in their lovely common room, it was warm. There was a fire, she had a book. Take Vincent and Millie. Vincent has detention and Millie's out there already with Theo. Theo hates Millie, Hermione said, wrinkling her nose. Try telling her that, Greg muttered, and she laughed. No, he insisted. She's nuts for him, and he's trying so hard to be all polite at her, but you know how boy crazy she is. Poor Theo, Hermione grinned, but still unmoved by the prospect of Quidditch match on this cold day. She had made no attempt to get up. Blaise, however, just yanked her blankets off of her. You have to come, house pride thing. I'll loan you a jumper if you're cold, but you have to come on already. You can sit between Millie and Theo and save him, Greg wheedled, and Hermione snorted. I'll sit between you and Blaise, and you can keep me warm. Done, Greg said, and Hermione frowned at him. Why do I feel like I've been played? Because you have, said Blaise, and despite your weird regard for rules, you aren't stupid. With a grumble and a discreet tuck of her book into her pocket, she joined the pair just in time to see the game begin. After a bit, during which there was much screeching and cheering from the stands, none of which really interested her, she leaned into Greg and asked, When does it get interesting? It's interesting now, he said, with a sigh, and Blaise wrapped an arm around her and tugged her in towards him. I see you were trying to pull your book out, he muttered. No reading in the stands, Hermione. Look, Greg yelled, poking her. They've spotted the snitch. She heard herself yelling, Go Flint, as the older boy knocked Potter off course, keeping the brat from grabbing the ball and ending the game. The announcers claimed the foul, and she acknowledged it was a foul, but in a game that involved hitting giant balls at players to knock them off their brooms, it seemed pretty mild to her. It was obvious and disgusting cheating had her hissing at Blaise. Is the commentary always this one-sided? Yep, said the older boy sitting behind them. Everyone hates us. We're evil, you know. He wiggled his fingers at the three of them, and Hermione turned to look at him and laughed. We're just better than they are, Blaise said, his eyes on the field. And they know it. Score! Greg yelled, and the cheer from their section of the stands was deafening. How much longer is this going to take? Hermione whispered to Blaise, though her attention had been caught by Potter, who seemed to have forgotten how to fly. And what's up with him? She asked, and the boy at her side followed her finger and pointed at Potter, whose broom was bucking. Don't know, don't care, Blaise said shortly, and she shrugged and went back to trying to decide whether Greg or Blaise put out more body heat, because this was really not a pleasant day. But whatever was going on with Potter was getting worse, and soon they were all watching, fascinated as his obviously hecked broom shook and twitched. He finally plummeted towards the ground, and just as she was sure he was about to die, he righted himself and... What the? Caught the snitch? Which essentially fell into his hand? That can't be right, she hissed at Greg, who was staring in open-mouthed shock at the field. Does that even count? Flint was yelling. It wasn't a fair catch, but the announcer was already declaring it a Gryffindor victory, and Hermione had her arms wrapped around herself and was muttering, I can't believe you made me come out in the cold just to watch this. This was terrible. They glumly wound their way down the stairs, Flint still yelling in the background, and went back to their common room. I hate Quidditch, Hermione muttered, before plopping down on the couch next to Theo, who had managed to shake Millie, and who tugged on her hair before slumping against her. That sucked, he said, and she nodded. It's cold, she complained, but the whining was half laughter as she threw the last few snowballs at Draco and Greg. Winter had come, and with that, snow, and everything was covered in a blanket that had any imperfections. They'd been out for over an hour. She'd had snow shoved down her coat, and she'd tackled Draco and pushed him into a drift, making Greg laugh as the other boy sputtered that she was cheating. I thought you wanted me to cheat more, she said, smirking at him. You and your thing about rules, Hermione. You need to get over that. Wasn't that what you said just this morning when I wouldn't let you copy off my essay? Now they were trooping back to the castle, ready to charm elves out of hot chocolate, shaking the snow from their hair and clothes when they got stuck behind a giant tree that blocked the corridor as the groundskeeper moved it to the main hall for Yule. Now, Draco, Hermione said, using her sweet voice, it's not my fault his family home makes the groundskeeper's hut look like a mansion. Maybe he'll get to be groundskeeper when he grows up, Draco said, turning to her with a smirk. That might be too intellectually rigorous for. Ron dove towards them, howling with fury, and had snatched Draco's coat in his fist when Professor Snape came up behind them. Fighting? The man asked with a sneer. That's against Hogwarts rules, Weasley. 5 points from Gryffindor. He was provoked, the groundskeeper said, glaring at the teacher. But the professor shrugged. Then he should learn some self-control. The man glanced at the 3 Slytherins. You 3 are dripping all over the hall. Go get yourselves dried up and order some cocoa from the kitchens before you get sick. Thank you, sir, Hermione said. We'll do that. Oh, the man added. And Miss Granger? Yes, sir? I was impressed by your last potions essay. Keep up the good work. Ron Weasley and Harry Potter both glared at her as she took Draco and Greg by the hands and led them past the furious pair. She smirked at them, then schooled her expression to a far more respectful one as she passed Professor Snape. What does too intellectually rigorous mean? Greg asked as they walked away. It means he's too stupid to do the job, Draco drawled, and Hermione glanced back to grin at both Ron and Harry, who had their fists clenched at their sides. The little jerks thought that they were too good to acknowledge any Slytherin, but she'd show them. Theo had spent the better part of the afternoon instructing Hermione in Yule traditions until she'd thrown her hands up and asked why there wasn't a wizarding traditions class instead of Muggle studies. Who cares about Muggle studies? She'd practically screeched. None of you are going to run off and live in Muggle Britain, are you? There were rude snorts from several older students in the common room, and at least one coughing fit. You don't exactly need to know how the British mail works or what one might watch on the telly. It's a waste of time. Why can't I have a class on something useful instead of being tormented this way? She'd crumpled forward and pillowed her head on her folded arms at that point. What's up with her? Greg asked, and Draco shrugged. Theo has decided that it's his sacred duty to school her in all things pure-blooded, Blaise drawled from the other table. He's being somewhat relentless. Yule is not that complicated, Theo said. It wouldn't be, mate, if you'd stuck to the basics. Give all your friends a present, nothing too expensive, or you'll look stuck on yourself. No jewelry unless you're engaged to the girl, which is hardly relevant for any of us, Blaise said. Could be relevant, Theo argued. People sometimes get engaged as children. Merlin, Theo, Draco said. No one does that anymore. Purebloods still engage their children to one another, Hermione said, wrinkling her nose. Ew. Do Muggles do that? Theo asked. No, she stuck her tongue out. That's gross. Gotta agree with her, Draco said. Hermione dutifully shopped and wrapped and gift presents out. A book on Quidditch for Theo, a scarf for Blaise, candy for Greg and Vincent. She got Muggle lip gloss for Pansy and Millie, knowing the combination of makeup and the forbidden lure of Muggle goods would be irresistible to both girls. She stood for a long time at the shop looking for a tiny golden snitch charm for Draco, and finally decided it might be too much and settled on an actual training snitch. He sent her a bracelet. It wasn't fancy. She wasn't sure if it was cheap glass beads even counted as jewelry in this world, but she stared at it for a long time when she opened the box. Stared at it for so long that the owl hooted impatiently at her until she shook herself and handed him a treat. She wore it every day at home on break, only taking it off when she had returned to school. She wasn't sure what it meant, wasn't sure it meant anything. He was kind of dating Pansy, if by dating one meant holding hands in the corridors and sitting together at Quidditch matches and on the couch in the common room. And though the intricacies of pureblood Yule etiquette, as filtered through Theo, had almost made her throw things, she had noticed they had rules for everything. She wasn't sure if wearing it would end up committing her to something, so she didn't. She did hug him on the train and said, "I love it. When we're older, I'll give you a real one," he said with a grin, and she felt herself exhale. A kind of relieved but nervous exhalation. "Brat," she said, and his grin got bigger. "I learned a new curse," he said with a smirk. "The first person to give you that dirty Slytherin look gets it." "You are so going to lose us every point we've gotten," she said, shoving him, and he put on the innocent face that he used when confronted by teachers. "But thank you." "No one picks on my housemate," he said. "They don't pick exactly," she said, sitting down, squishing herself up against the window to make room for Theo and Greg, who trooped in and were now arguing about some obscure Quidditch rule. "They just sneer. They look at all of us like we're diseased and contagious." "I know," he said, his voice low and angry. "Someday they'll all be sorry." When she found him laughing outside the library, his mean little laugh, she sighed. "What have you done?" she asked him. "Nothing," he said, rolling his wand between his hands. She grabbed him and started hauling him to the dungeons. "You need to learn to lie better," she told him. "Was it Weasley or Potter that you harassed?" "Neither," he said with a smug primeness that made her want to kick him in the shin. "I just didn't like the look on Longbottom's face, so I leg-locked him." "And what look was that? Utter terror at the sight of you?" "It's like he has 'pick on me' written on his forehead," Draco admitted with a grin. "But he was telling some girl not to worry that she couldn't do as well as you in charms because..." There he cut himself off, some sudden sense of tactfulness jutting in between his brains and his mouth. "Because I'm just a stinking Slytherin," Hermione said, a question in her voice. The look on Draco's face confirmed it. He watched her expression quiver for a moment before she set into her stubborn, "no one can hurt me" glare. "He didn't mean it," Draco offered. "He just wanted to make whoever she was feel better." "He meant it," Hermione said. "They all mean it." She blinked fiercely a few times. "Yeah," Draco said. "But you're worth 12 of those idiots. Come on. I got a new box for my mom this morning. I bet it's one of those cakes you like so much." Hermione smiled a little at that. "How come she always sends those now?" "Because I told her you liked them," he said. Hermione stopped walking towards the dormitory, and once he was a few feet ahead of her, Draco stopped too, and turned back towards her. "What?" he demanded. "Your mother is sending cakes to you for me?" she asked, and looked confused. "Well, yeah, we're friends, aren't we?" "But..." Hermione trailed off, then said, "Muggle-born?" "Oh, like she cares about that," Draco said, rolling his eyes. "Haven't you figured out by now that no one does?" He stopped to consider. "Well, my crazy aunt might, from what I've heard about her, but she's in Azkaban, so it's not like anyone exactly worries about her opinion. You're Slytherin. You stupid girl. You're one of us." Her smile was shaky, so Draco gave her a shove. "Don't make me hex you as if you were some dopey Gryffindor. Come on." He began to race down the hall, and, swiping at her eyes, Hermione followed. Hermione's feelings at Quidditch remained the same, which would have been fine if everyone hadn't absolutely insisted she go to yet another game. "We aren't even playing in this one," she whined, as Draco dragged her to the stands. "I don't see why I have to go." She drew the last word out, as they passed a group of Gryffindors, there to cheer on their rotten seeker. Apparently, the youngest seeker ever since the dawn of time. Ron Weasley looked at her as they passed. Her hand clasped tightly in Draco's, as if he were afraid she'd get loose and bolt back into the common room. Weasley jabbed her in the side with an elbow, and she gasped at the sudden shock. "Sorry," the boy said with a smirk. "Didn't see you there." Malfoy looked at the boy and then at Greg and Theo, who were following Hermione. Vincent, as usual, was in detention. "You know how I think they pick Gryffindor team members?" he said loudly. "They get the people they feel sorry for. Potter's got no parents, the Weasleys have no money. It's sweet, really." Hermione sighed and nudged him forward at their seats. "Look, it's Neville Longbottom," Draco was saying as they sat down. "You remember Neville, right, Hermione? He's the one who can't reason his way out of a paper sack. I'm surprised he's not on the team, too." "You leave him alone," Ron snapped, not turning from the game. "If brains were gold, Neville would be poorer than you," Draco taunted, as Theo began to tug Hermione away from the brewing confrontation. As Potter started flying towards the ground at a ridiculous speed, Draco added, "Oh, you're in luck, Weasley. Looks like your buddy might have found some money on the ground." Ron turned and threw himself across the stands at Draco, and Theo yanked Hermione wholly out of the way. Neville and Greg joined in, and the four boys missed it as Potter caught the snitch again because they were busy punching one another. "Honestly," Hermione muttered at Theo as they looked at the brawl going on at their feet. At least this time the game was short. Hermione spread out the color-coded exam study tables she'd made for all of her friends. "Hermione," Greg said, looking at his, "exams aren't for ages. But it's important to be prepared, and it's only 10 weeks away," she said, her voice starting to rise. "I should have been studying for ages, and you keep making me go to Quidditch games. I don't know what I'm going to—" Theo pulled the entire pile away from her and calmly dumped the lot into the fire. "Stop," he said. "Stop with the SWAT thing before you make yourself miserable and unbearable." "Theo," she wailed, watching her tables and charts go up in flames. He shoved a chocolate frog at her. "Sorry," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "I'm just protecting you from yourself." "Nicholas Flamel," she said after she opened the package. "Darn, I already have 5 of these." "You aren't going to believe what I found out," Draco said, pouring himself some juice and smirking. "Oh?" Hermione had her head into the charms book and was drilling herself on all the secondary and tertiary uses for every charm that they were supposed to know. "The groundskeeper guy? The one Potter and Weasley are always visiting?" "He has a dragon." "You're right." Hermione looked at him. "I don't believe that. The man lives in a wooden hut. How could he possibly be stupid enough to have a dragon? Plus," she looked back down again, "one wouldn't fit." "It's a baby," Draco said smugly, and she rolled her eyes. "Draco, it's not even legal to have a dragon." "I know." She put her book away and gave her friend her full attention. The boy looked positively gleeful, and that never boded well. He tended to be all bluster and no planning, and he'd end up hexing some stupid student right in front of the teacher and lose them all points. "Draco, if he does have a dragon, we should tell someone." "We should," he agreed. "But we won't, will we?" she asked with a sigh. "Nope," he grinned at her, "not until we can get Potter and Weasley into as much trouble as possible." "Your obsession with Potter is downright weird," she muttered. Draco's obsession with a pair of Gryffindors might have been weird, but it was, she had to admit, great fun to go and torment Weasley. The Git had apparently managed to get his hand chomped on by the baby dragon, and in a turn of events that shocked no one but the boy himself, the bite became infected and his hand swollen. Apparently, dragon fangs were poisonous. "There's a reason you aren't supposed to have dragons," Hermione said smugly, as she and Draco headed to the hospital wing. "They're dangerous." He stopped in the hall when she said that, the textbook that they were taking to Weasley as their excuse to visit him in one hand. "The dragons are dangerous," he agreed, his voice low, "but only to outsiders. They're fiercely protective of their own." She looked at him and after a moment said, Well, Weasley's clearly not one of the dragons. Draco snorted at that. I'd say not. How's your hand? Hermione gushed at Weasley once they were in the infirmary. We were just so worried. How did you say this happened again? Draco asked, watching the Mediwitch without seeming to. A dog bite, Weasley muttered. Thanks for bringing me my book. You can go now. Oh no, Hermione said. I wouldn't dream of leaving you alone here to suffer without me. She picked up a note from the side of the table and said, Your brother, the Dragon Keeper, wrote you? Wasn't that nice of him? It must be really nice having a large family to look after you when you get a dog bite. She cast a woeful look at Malfoy and handed him the note, and Weasley reached out to try and grab it from her. I'm an only child, you know. Me too, Draco said with a sneer. Though, I always thought having more kids than you can afford to feed was stupid, and who wants nothing to do with hand-me-downs? Saturday at midnight, Hermione leaned in closer. How interesting that your brother, the Dragon Keeper, is coming by when you just got yourself nipped in the hand by something you might be interested in. We should tell, Draco said. We should let the dragon bite them all, Hermione corrected. I like the way you think, Draco smirked. Tonight's the night, Draco whispered, and she nodded back in silent accord. Greg and Vincent followed them as they snuck their way towards the tallest tower. We'll catch that kid with his dragon and read him out to Snape, and then he'll be gone. They waited in an alcove by the stairs, and everything would have gone smashingly if McGonagall hadn't decided that she needed a walk. She didn't believe them, of course. How dare you, she gasped as she found them out, wandering about when it's near midnight? But Professor, Hermione pleaded, it's Potter. He's got a dragon. Is that rubbish really the best you can do? Out after curfew with 3 boys and she blames it on a dragon? McGonagall huffed. In my day. Oh, detention for all of you, and 20 points from Slytherin. I'll be talking to Professor Snape about these ridiculous lies you've been telling. As she was dragging them off, Hermione and Draco, quite literally by their ears, with Greg and Vincent trailing behind them. They could hear a faint laugh that sounded a lot like Potter. They exchanged looks, and Hermione mouthed, But where is he? And Draco shrugged, his eyes narrowed. Wherever he was, apparently McGonagall had caught him too, and Weasley as well. The overnight loss of 20 points from Slytherin was overshadowed by the far more monumental loss of 150 from Gryffindor. Hermione and Draco quietly smirked at one another at the commotion. The utter loathing that followed Potter all day as his housemates discovered that he was the one responsible for their point loss. It's worth having detention with that git, isn't it? Draco asked, and Hermione grinned. It really is, she agreed. Vincent and Greg were assigned to the kitchens. They both already had a long-standing relationship helping the elves scrub pans, and McGonagall clearly thought that they were followers. Draco and Hermione she had tagged as troublemakers, and they were informed that their detention would be served with Hagrid, and that Filch would take them there. I don't see why we just can't write lines, Draco grumbled, and Hermione gave him a hard shove. Doesn't matter what it is, she said. It's worth it, right? I suppose, he said, looking like he didn't suppose at all. She started to agree with him when she discovered that the idiot groundskeeper was taking them into the so-called Forbidden Forest to help him track down an injured unicorn. In what sane universe did the school employee take children into the woods? Woods that they had been explicitly told the first day of the year that they were never, ever to go into, to track down a hurt and wild animal. I don't think this is a good idea, she muttered, and Draco shot her a grateful look, even as Weasley taunted them. Scared you two? Sensible, she snapped back. What if the thing that got the unicorn finds us before we find it? Draco asked, his voice trembling a little, and the groundskeeper laughed. You'll be fine, he promised. A promise Hermione had trouble crediting, given this was the man who thought that having a dragon in the wood and hut was a good idea. I'm not doing it, she said. The groundskeeper narrowed his eyes at her and said, You got in trouble, and you'll do what you're told. I don't think so, she shook her head. Come on, Draco, we'll go back to the castle and write a quick note to your father. Didn't you tell me he was on the board of governors? Yes, he said, his voice still a little bit shaky. This, she said, glaring at the groundskeeper, is the most insane idea I've ever heard of. Sending a group of 11-year-olds into the woods at night, and I'm sure Mr. and Mrs. Malfoy would agree with me. Draco seemed to be getting his feet back under him now that Hermione had taken over and was refusing to go along with this trek into the woods. They would, he said. They'd be livid to know that the school put me in danger. They might, Hermione drawled, even demand the resignation of the people responsible. That would be... She paused and looked around. Oh yes, that would be you. She looked at Hagrid and smirked. The man glared at her, but she just smiled at him and said, Well, Draco, shall we go head back up to the castle now? Fine, the groundskeeper said, gritting his teeth. You two brats can wait in my cottage until we come back. Should we write lines while we wait? Hermione asked, her voice sweet. For our detention? The man stomped off without answering, Potter and Weasley following him. That was brilliant, Draco breathed, looking at her. You're utterly brilliant. She grinned at him, and they settled down to wait until the unicorn hunting party had returned. I love exams, Hermione said with a satisfying smile on her face, as she laid on the grass with Theo and Pansy. And those were so much easier than I expected them to be. Why do you love exams? Pansy asked, trying to spot Draco. Class is just so boring most days, Hermione said. At least on exam day I have something to do all the entire time. You need to skiv off more, Theo said. Skiv off from class? Hermione asked, sounding horrified. Yep, Theo grinned. Next year I'm totally getting you to do it. This is gorgeous, Hermione breathed, looking around the Great Hall. Green and silver decorations hung everywhere, and there was a huge banner with their serpent crest behind the head table. Looks good, doesn't it? Draco took her arm. 7th year in a row. We're the best house. After all, we've got the best students. Swats and jocks both. And we win. We won fair and square, she agreed, as they squeezed into the benches at their table. The headmaster was making one of his dotty announcements, and she tuned him out until he read off their point total. 472, which made it 160 more than their hated rivals, the Gryffindors. And they all began banging their goblets onto the table and cheering. She looked over at Potter and Weasley and smirked at them. See what happens when you play by the rules, she thought. You win. Until the unthinkable happened. Dumbledore announced that he had some last-minute point changes. To Weasley, for a chess game, 50 points. What's going on? She hissed to Draco. No one gets 50 points for winning a game of chess. I only got 10 when I... But he cut her off. I don't know, shut up. To Party Patil, using logic, 50 points. Hermione turned to Theo and looked at him, and he shook his head, helplessly. To Harry Potter, for bravery, 60 points. Hermione started to cry. She'd spent the entire year working to earn her points. 5 here, 10 there, a whole year of excellence and any recognition of that. The fair recognition she'd earned had just been wiped out by a casually unfair authority figure. We're still tied, Draco said, wrapping his arm around her. It's a tie, Hermione, don't cry. To Neville Longbottom for standing up to his friends. 10 points. No, we're not, she said. We're not tied. And she and her friends stared in horror as the room's decorations were changed, as the whole school cheered that they had lost the school cup. It's not fair, she said, her voice choked. You thought life was fair? Theo asked her, and she pressed her lips together. I don't anymore, was all she said.